We are cutting you loose. Your company card is canceled. Figure out how to get home yourself, loser." I read the text message 3 times. I was standing in the lobby of a modest, slightly run-down hotel in Florence, Italy. The terracotta tiles beneath my feet felt more solid than anything else in my life at that exact moment. My boss's words glowed on the small screen of my phone, each letter feeling like a tiny, jagged knife twisting in my gut. I did not cry. I did not throw my phone across the room. I stood there, numb, while tourists and locals walked past me, dragging their luggage, speaking rapid Italian, and living their perfectly normal lives while mine was quietly imploding. I typed back slowly, my thumb shaking a little bit. "Thank you for letting me know." Then I sat down on a worn leather chair near the entrance and tried to remember how to breathe. Let me take you back a bit. Let me tell you how a 55-year-old man ended up here, thousands of miles from his home, holding exactly 45 euros in his wallet and staring at a text message that basically said he was less than nothing. My name is Walter. I am 55 years old, and I have a 16-year-old daughter named Chloe. She is my entire world. My wife passed away 7 years ago from a sudden illness, leaving the two of us to navigate the wreckage. It has not been easy. Being a single father to a teenage girl while trying to hold down a demanding corporate job is a balancing act that nobody truly prepares you for. For the past 5 years, I worked at Oakhaven Luxury. They manufactured high-end leather goods and premium accessories, the kind of stuff that costs more than my monthly mortgage payment for a single handbag. I was not a designer. I was not an executive who sat in a glass office. I was a senior supply chain coordinator. My job was to find the people who made the materials we needed, the premium leather, the custom hardware, the fine silk linings, and negotiate the terms to get those materials into our production lines. The pay was decent enough to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table, but not much more. I was good at my job. I was genuinely good at it. I took the time to learn the intricacies of the materials. I learned a few phrases in different languages to speak to the suppliers in their native tongue. I asked about their families, remembered their kids' names, and treated them like human beings, rather than line items on a spreadsheet. In international business, especially with family-run operations, that is how you build real trust. But my boss, Donovan, did not see it that way. Donovan was 41 years old, always wearing suits that were a little too tight and smelling like a cologne that announced his arrival a minute before he entered the room. He had been promoted to vice president of procurement a couple of years ago, and to this day, nobody quite understood how. He treated our suppliers like vending machines, put a quarter in, expect a luxury product out. He liked to remind me of my place in the hierarchy. "You are lucky to have this job, Walter," he would say whenever I needed a couple of hours off to take Chloe to a parent-teacher conference or a dentist appointment. "There are 100 young guys hungry for your desk." I would nod, swallow my pride, and get back to work. I needed the paycheck. Chloe needed braces, clothes, and a college fund. A few weeks ago, Donovan called me into his office. He looked panicked. "We have a massive problem," he snapped, pointing at a spreadsheet on his monitor. "Our primary leather supplier in Florence, the one handling the entire spring collection, is threatening to walk away." "Why?" I asked, though I already had a pretty good idea. "How should I know? They are complaining about terms. You are the one who talks to these people. Fix it." He spoke to me as if I were a janitor cleaning up his mess, not the guy who built the relationships he was constantly ruining. I reached out to the supplier. The owner was a man named Enzo. His family had been running the tannery for 4 generations. They produced some of the finest, most buttery leather I had ever handled. When I finally got Enzo on the phone, his frustration was palpable. "Walter," Enzo said, his voice tight, "your company treats us like we are machines. Last month, your boss demanded a 10% price reduction. This month, he wants delivery times cut in half. He does not ask if this is physically possible for my workers. He demands it. We cannot work like this anymore." "I understand, Enzo," I told him calmly. "Let me see what I can do to make this right." I spent the next 3 days drafting a comprehensive proposal. It included better payment terms, a realistic delivery schedule, and guaranteed order volumes that would allow Enzo's tannery to plan their production cycles efficiently. It was a fair deal that protected both sides. I brought it to Donovan. He barely skimmed the first page before tossing it back across his desk. "Go there," he said dismissively. "Fly to Italy and fix this in person. Make them sign a new exclusivity agreement. Do not come back until it is done." "When?" I asked. My stomach dropping. "Tomorrow. You will be there for 3 weeks, maybe 4. Whatever it takes." "Donovan, I have a teenage daughter at home. I can't leave for a month on a day's notice." Donovan leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. "Figure it out, Walter. Have a neighbor watch her. This is your job. If you can't handle it, I will find someone who can." I arrived in Florence on a Tuesday morning. The hotel Donovan's assistant had booked for me was cheap, far from the city center, and smelled faintly of old smoke. But I didn't care. I needed to get the job done so I could go home. The next day, I took a train and then a bus out to Enzo's tannery in the Tuscan countryside. The facility was incredible, a mix of old-world craftsmanship and modern machinery. The smell of treated leather and earth was strong and familiar. Enzo met me at the door. He was a sturdy man in his early 60s, with calloused hands and a sharp, intelligent gaze. For the first week, we didn't even talk about the contract. We talked about his family, the history of the tannery, the difficulties of maintaining quality in a world that only cared about speed. I listened. I listened. By the second week, Enzo and I sat down to hash out the details. We compromised. We found middle ground. We drafted an agreement that would secure Oakhaven's spring collection and guarantee Enzo's workers fair treatment. It was a $15 million deal, a massive win for Oakhaven. But Enzo had one strict condition. "I will sign this," he told me, tapping the draft with his thick finger. "But only if you are named as the sole executor and administrator of this contract. My family will not deal with your boss. We deal with you, Walter. If he tries to intervene, or if you are removed from this role, the contract is null and void." "I can put that in," I agreed, knowing it was the only way to save the deal. 3 weeks of grueling work, 3 weeks of missing my daughter, 3 weeks of eating cheap panini to save the company money. And then, the night before the official signing, as I sat in the hotel lobby reviewing the final paperwork, my phone buzzed. It was the text from Donovan, firing me, canceling my company credit card, leaving me stranded with 45 euros. And calling me a loser. I sat in that worn leather chair in the hotel lobby for what felt like hours. The reality of the situation washed over me in slow, suffocating waves. I pulled out my laptop and logged into my corporate expense account. Access denied. I tried to check my flight itinerary on the airline's app. The return ticket, which was booked on the corporate account, had been canceled. Donovan was not bluffing. He had done it. He had fired me via a text message, cut off my financial access, and left me stranded in a foreign country without a second thought. I had 45 euros in my wallet and maybe $300 in my personal checking account back home. Money I desperately needed to pay the upcoming utility bills. The humiliation was a physical ache in my chest. After 20 years in the industry, after sacrificing my time, my daughter's school play, and my dignity to appease an arrogant boss, this was my reward. Tossed out like a piece of defective machinery, instead a strange, cold clarity began to settle over me. The panic receded, replaced by something much more focused. I looked down at the leather briefcase resting by my feet. Inside was the finalized draft of the $15 million agreement. The contract that would literally save Oakhaven Luxury's entire spring collection. The contract that Enzo had explicitly tied to my continued involvement. I stood up. I walked out of the hotel into the cool Italian evening air. I found a small, cheap cafe, bought a shot of espresso to steady my nerves, and waited for the morning. I didn't sleep a wink. The next morning, I took the early bus back out to the Tuscan countryside. When I finally walked through the heavy wooden doors of Familia Rossi Leather, Enzo was standing in the main workshop, inspecting a massive hide of caramel-colored leather. He looked up, a broad, welcoming smile spreading across his weathered face. "Walter, my friend," Enzo called out, wiping his hands on a rag, "you are here early. Are the papers ready for my signature?" I stopped a few feet away from him. I didn't smile back. The words felt like ash in my mouth. "Enzo, there is not going to be a signing." Enzo's smile faded. He dropped the rag and walked over to me, his brow furrowing with concern. "What are you talking about? Did your boss change the terms again? If he wants another price cut, I swear to God, Walter, I will." It is not the terms, I interrupted softly. My boss, Donovan, he fired me last night. He canceled my company card and canceled my flight home. I no longer work for Oakhaven. For a long moment, the only sound in the workshop was the hum of the polishing machines in the next room. Enzo stared at me, his eyes widening in disbelief. Then, a dark, furious red crept up his neck. He fired you? Enzo's voice was dangerously quiet. After you spent 3 weeks here fixing his mess? After you built this agreement from nothing? Yes, and he left you here, stranded? Yes. I looked down at my worn shoes. I came to apologize, Enzo. I know how much time you invested in this negotiation. I am so sorry to let you down. Oakhaven will probably send someone else next week to try and finalize the deal with you. I wanted to tell you face to face before I figure out a way to get back to my daughter. Enzo let out a short, harsh bark of laughter. It was not a happy sound. He turned to one of his foremen and shouted something in rapid Italian, waving his hand to shut down the machines. The workshop fell silent. Enzo walked over to a heavy oak workbench and motioned for me to sit on a stool. Walter, look at me, Enzo said, leaning his heavy hands on the table. Oakhaven is not going to send anyone else to finalize this deal, because there is no deal to finalize. They are going to try, I said tiredly. They need your leather for the spring line. Donovan is arrogant, but he isn't stupid enough to lose the supply. He wanted me out of the picture so he could claim the credit for the negotiation and save my annual bonus. He is exactly that stupid, Enzo corrected me, his eyes flashing. Do you remember the clause I insisted you put into the final draft? The condition precedent? I nodded slowly. Yes. The clause stating that I must be the primary contact and administrator for the duration of the contract. Exactly. Enzo smiled, but it was a wolfish grin. Under international contract principles and under the legal doctrine of void ab initio, that clause is a fundamental condition of the agreement. Void ab initio means invalid from the outset, because Donovan terminated the authorized agent. Before the contract was formally executed, the entire foundation of the agreement is legally void. It never existed. Even if he tries to claim we had a verbal agreement over the phone, the failure of that specific condition precedent renders everything null. I stared at him, the legal terminology clicking into place in my exhausted brain. Void ab initio. It wasn't a technicality. It was a legal trapdoor, and Donovan had happily jumped right through it. He destroyed his own supply chain, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. He destroyed his company's spring line, Enzo corrected, pouring 2 small cups of strong coffee from a thermos on the bench and sliding one toward me. And he did it because he let his ego blind his business sense. My family will not speak to Oakhaven ever again. We do not do business with people who treat their workers like garbage. I took a sip of the bitter coffee. Enzo, that's $15 million. You can't walk away from that kind of money. My workers will be fine, Enzo interrupted smoothly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his cell phone, because Oakhaven is not the only luxury brand in the world, Walter. And they are certainly not the only ones who want our leather. He tapped a few buttons on his phone, scrolling through his contacts. For the last 6 months, a company called Aurelia Elegance has been trying to secure an exclusive contract with us. They are based in New York, a serious competitor to Oakhaven. I have been telling them no, out of loyalty to the relationship you and I were building. Enzo looked up from his phone, meeting my eyes. Aurelia's head of international procurement is a woman named Isabella. She is smart, respectful, and she understands the value of real relationships. I am going to call her right now. I am going to tell her that Familia Rossi is finally ready to sign an exclusive deal. He paused, a glimmer of genuine warmth returning to his expression. And then I am going to tell her that she must hire the man who negotiated the best, most fair supply contract I have seen in 40 years in this business. Enzo, you don't have to do that, I stammered, overwhelmed. I can't ask you to leverage your business for me. You are not asking, Enzo said firmly, pressing the call button and holding the phone to his ear. I am offering. You proved your character over the last 3 weeks, Walter. You chose to treat my family with respect when your boss demanded you treat us like slaves. Now, it is my turn to show you what that respect earns. I sat perfectly still on the wooden stool as Enzo began speaking rapidly in Italian into the phone, his voice carrying the undeniable weight of a man who knew exactly what he was worth, and more importantly, knew exactly what I was worth. For the first time in 24 hours, the crushing weight in my chest began to lift. I wasn't a stranded loser. I was the key to a $15 million empire. Enzo's phone conversation lasted no more than 10 minutes. When he finally hung up, he looked at me with a satisfied gleam in his eye. "Isabella wants to speak with you," he said, already setting up a laptop on his workbench. "She is in New York, so it is early there, but she is eager. Eager." A few moments later, the video call connected. This was Isabella, the head of procurement for Aurelia Elegance. "Walter," she began, her voice crisp and professional, yet remarkably warm. "Enzo has told me an interesting story. He says that Oakhaven Luxury terminated the architect of a $15 million supply chain agreement, leaving you stranded in Florence, and subsequently voiding their entire contract." "That is an accurate summary, yes," I replied, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and adrenaline pumping through my veins. "Enzo also tells me that the agreement you drafted is one of the most balanced, sustainable, and legally sound documents he has seen in his career. He refuses to sign with Oakhaven, and he refuses to sign with us unless you are managing the relationship." Isabella leaned closer to her webcam. "I do not know your former boss, Walter, but he sounds like a catastrophic idiot. I, however, am not. I need someone who understands the nuances of international supplier relationships, someone who knows that screaming at a vendor does not produce premium leather." "I understand that perfectly," I said. "Good. Here is my offer," Isabella stated without missing a beat. "I want you to come work for Aurelia Elegance as our Director of Global Sourcing. The salary is 30% higher than whatever Oakhaven was paying you. Full benefits, starting. Furthermore, we will handle your travel arrangements. I will have my assistant book you a first-class ticket back to the States today. Once you are home and settled with your daughter, we can discuss your start date." "Do we have a deal?" "Yes," I managed to say, my voice cracking slightly. "Yes, Isabella, we have a deal, thank you." "Don't thank me, Walter. You earned this by doing the right thing when it was difficult." She smiled. "I will have the employment contracts and your flight details emailed to you within the hour. Welcome to Aurelia." The screen went black as the call ended. I slumped back on the wooden stool, letting out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 3 weeks. Enzo patted my shoulder heavily. "You see, my friend? The universe corrects itself. When garbage takes itself out, you do not chase the garbage truck." Before I could fully process what had happened, Enzo's cell phone rang again. He glanced at the caller ID and a slow, wicked smile spread across his face. He held the screen up for me to see. It was an international number, Donovan. "Ah!" Enzo chuckled darkly. "The garbage truck is calling. Shall we?" He answered the call and put it on speakerphone, setting the device down on the wooden workbench between us. "Enzo!" Donovan's voice boomed through the small speaker. He sounded too cheerful, a forced, artificial enthusiasm that's made my skin crawl. "My friend, I hope you are having a wonderful morning in beautiful Italy. Listen, I wanted to reach out regarding the finalized paperwork. I know Walter was handling the ground level stuff, but there has been a slight restructuring on our end. I will be taking over the account personally. I am sending my assistant over with the revised signature pages this afternoon." Enzo leaned casually against the workbench. "There is no need to send anyone, Donovan." "Oh, fantastic. Did Walter leave the signed copies at the hotel before his departure?" Donovan asked, clearly eager to wrap this up and claim his victory. "No, Donovan," Enzo replied smoothly. "There is no need to send anyone because there is no agreement. Familia Rossi will not be doing business with Oakhaven Luxury." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. Then Donovan's voice returned, stripped of all its fake cheer. It was tight, high-pitched, and laced with sudden panic. "Excuse me? Enzo, what are you talking about? We have a verbal agreement. We have been negotiating for 3 weeks. You can't back out now. I have already promised the board that the spring materials are secured. You promised them something you did not own," Enzo countered coldly. "And you destroyed the only bridge you had to get it. You fired the man who built that bridge." "This is ridiculous," Donovan shouted. his voice echoing thinly in the vast workshop. Walter was a coordinator, a low-level employee. His termination is an internal Oakhaven matter and has no bearing on our corporate agreement. If you try to back out now, I will drag your tannery into international court for breach of contract. We had a meeting of the minds. Enzo looked at me and nodded. It was my turn. I leaned closer to the phone. Donovan, you don't have a contract to breach, I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm and even. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Walter? What the hell are you doing there? I told you to figure out your own way home, you loser. Are you trying to sabotage my deal? It was never your deal, Donovan, I replied. And you didn't read the final draft of the contract, did you? You skimmed it as usual. I read enough to know it's legally binding, he snapped. Then you missed the condition precedent, I explained, leaning back on my stool. Section 4, paragraph 2. The contract explicitly names me, Walter, as the required executor and sole administrative contact for the duration of the agreement. It was a strict contingency demanded by Familia Rossi to ensure they wouldn't have to deal with you. By terminating my employment before the final execution of the document, you triggered a failure of that condition precedent. In legal terms, Donovan, the entire agreement is void ab initio. Invalid from the outset. There was no meeting of the minds because you removed the authorized agent. You're lying, Donovan hissed, but I could hear the desperation creeping into his tone. You can't do that. That's tortious interference. No, it is basic contract law, I corrected him gently. You can't claim tortious interference on a contract that legally never existed. You fired me, Donovan. You canceled my card. You stranded me here. You made a choice based on your own ego, and this is the direct consequence of that choice. Familia Rossi is within their legal rights to walk away, which they have. Walter, listen to me. Donovan's voice shifted, attempting a tone of frantic negotiation. Okay, let's calm down. This is a misunderstanding. I was stressed last night. The restructuring was a mistake. You are rehired. Full reinstatement with a bonus. Get Enzo to sign the paper, Walter, please. If this deal falls through, the spring line is dead. The board will have my head. I'm sorry, Donovan, I said, feeling a profound sense of closure. But I don't work for Oakhaven anymore. I have a new job to get to. A few hours later, Isabella's assistant emailed me a first-class ticket out of Florence, along with my new employment contract. As I sat in the luxurious leather seat of the airplane, sipping sparkling water and watching the Italian coastline fade beneath the clouds, I thought about the text message that had almost destroyed me. We're cutting you loose. They hadn't cut me loose. They had cut their own throat. And I was finally going home to my daughter. The flight back to the United States was the most peaceful 13 hours I had experienced in years. Sitting in the spacious first-class cabin, I finally allowed myself to relax. The knot of anxiety that had lived in my stomach for the past 5 years. The constant fear of displeasing Donovan, the dread of losing my income, the stress of barely scraping by, was gone. In its place was a quiet, profound sense of security. I read over my new employment contract with Aurelia Elegance 3 times. The salary was exactly what Isabella had promised. The benefits were comprehensive, covering both me and Chloe. There was even a clause allowing for significant remote work, meaning I wouldn't have to miss any more school plays or parent-teacher conferences. When the plane finally touched down in New York, I navigated customs with a light step. My sister Sarah was waiting at the arrival's gate. When she saw me walking toward her, carrying the same battered suitcase, but looking different, she threw her arms around me. "You look okay," Sarah said, pulling back to examine my face, clearly expecting to see a broken man. "When you texted me from the airport saying you were coming home early, I was terrified something terrible had happened." Something terrible did happen. I smiled, grabbing my bag. And then something wonderful happened after. During the drive back to my house in the suburbs, I laid out the entire story. I told her about Donovan's cruel text, the cancellation of the company card, the crushing despair in the hotel lobby, and then the incredible turn of events with Enzo and Isabella. Sarah laughed so hard, she had to pull the car over to the shoulder of the highway to wipe the tears from her eyes. "So wait," she gasped, catching her breath. "Because Donovan was too arrogant to read the contract he forced you to negotiate, he literally voided the only deal that could save their entire spring season?" Void ab initio. I nodded, tapping my temple. Invalid from the start. He fired the authorized agent, so the contract evaporated. And now, Aurelia Elegance has the exclusive rights to Familia Rossi's leathers. That, Sarah declared, pulling the car back onto the road, is the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. We pulled into the driveway as the afternoon sun was beginning to set. I walked through the front door, the familiar scent of our home hitting me like a warm embrace. Chloe was sitting on the living room couch, her headphones on, staring intently at her laptop screen. She didn't hear me come in. I walked over and gently tapped her shoulder. She jumped, pulling her headphones down, her eyes going wide. "Dad, you're home. You weren't supposed to be back for another 2 weeks." She threw her arms around my waist, hugging me tight. I buried my face in her hair, feeling a wave of intense gratitude wash over me. "I finished the job early, sweetheart, and I have some incredible news." She was correct, and over the next few weeks, the reality of Donovan's massive failure began to unfold in spectacular fashion. My transition to Aurelia Elegance was seamless. Isabella proved to be a phenomenal leader, demanding, yes, but incredibly fair and deeply respectful of the expertise I brought to the table. I spent my first month securing not only Enzo's leather, but also lining up premium silk suppliers in Thailand and hardware artisans in Japan. I was doing the exact same work I had done for Oakhaven, but this time I had the budget, the authority, and the backing of a company that valued the relationships I was building. Meanwhile, the situation at Oakhaven Luxury was deteriorating rapidly. I didn't actively seek out the news, but the luxury fashion industry is a small, tightly knit world. Gossip travels faster than a private jet. Without the premium Italian leather from Familia Rossi, Oakhaven was paralyzed. Their entire spring collection, heavily marketed and eagerly anticipated by retailers, had been designed around the specific textures and colors of Enzo's hides. In a panic, Oakhaven's legal department attempted to sue Familia Rossi for breach of contract, claiming that the email threads and initial negotiations constituted a binding agreement. Enzo's lawyers, backed by the formidable legal team at Aurelia Elegance, swatted the lawsuit away like a minor nuisance. They presented the final draft of the contract, highlighting the condition precedent clause, and proved that Donovan's own recorded actions, terminating the specified executor, rendered the agreement void ab initio. The judge threw the case out before it even reached discovery, noting that Oakhaven had no legal standing to enforce a contract they had effectively canceled themselves. With no legal recourse, and a warehouse full of inferior materials, Oakhaven was forced to delay their spring launch by 2 months. When the collection finally hit the stores, the backlash was immediate and brutal. High-end fashion bloggers and critics tore the products apart. Customers who were accustomed to Oakhaven's pristine quality returned the bags in droves, complaining about cheap textures and poor durability. Major luxury retailers, furious at the delays and the compromised quality, canceled their outstanding orders and demanded refunds. The financial hemorrhage was catastrophic. A collection that was projected to generate nearly $40 million in revenue ended up costing the company millions in returns, legal fees, and lost contracts, and the board of directors demanded a scapegoat. They didn't have to look far. Through the industry grapevine, I heard the details of Donovan's downfall. It wasn't a quiet resignation. It was a spectacular public firing. The board discovered the full extent of his mismanagement. How he had alienated their most crucial supplier, how he had ignored the explicit terms of the contract, and how he had stranded a senior employee overseas out of sheer petty malice. Donovan was stripped of his title, his unvested stock options were canceled, and he was unceremoniously escorted out of the Oakhaven headquarters by corporate security. Isabella called me with the final piece of news. "Have you heard about your old friend Donovan?" she asked, her tone neutral, though I could hear the faint amusement underneath. "I heard he was let go," I said, signing off on the Scottish proposal. "He was," Isabella confirmed, "and apparently he has been quietly blacklisted by every major luxury brand in the country. Nobody wants to hire a vice president of procurement who actively destroys supply chains and triggers void ab initio clauses because he doesn't know how to read a contract. Last I heard, he took a middle management job at a discount shoe manufacturer in the Midwest." I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at my front yard, where Chloe was sitting on the porch, laughing on her phone with a friend. "Well," I said softly, "I suppose the universe does have a sense of humor." 6 months after I joined Aurelia Elegance, our spring collection officially launched. It was, by every metric, a resounding triumph. The pieces crafted from Familia Rossi's leather were the crown jewels of the season. The rich caramel tones and flawless texture caught the attention of every major fashion publication. We sold out of our primary handbag line within the first 10 days, and pre-orders for the next production run backed up our manufacturing schedule for months. Aurelia Elegance didn't meet their quarterly projections. They obliterated them, establishing themselves as the new undisputed leader in the luxury accessory market. To celebrate the launch, Isabella hosted an elegant private dinner in New York for the core executive team. She insisted I bring Chloe. When we walked into the private dining room of the upscale Manhattan restaurant, Chloe looked around in awe at the glittering chandeliers and the sharply dressed executives. I felt a deep, quiet pride welling up inside me. I was no longer the exhausted, beaten-down coordinator begging for an hour off. I was a respected director, a key architect of this company's success. During the dinner, Isabella stood up to give a toast. She raised her glass, the crystal catching the light, and looked directly at me. "To Walter," she said, her voice carrying easily over the quiet hum of the room. "The man who understands that true luxury isn't about the final product. It is about the relationships that build it, the respect that sustains it, and the integrity required to walk away from those who offer neither." The entire table raised their glasses. Chloe beamed at me, her eyes shining with pride. It was a moment I will carry with me for the rest of my life. It has been 2 years since that text message in the Florence hotel lobby. A lot has changed. Oakhaven Luxury never fully recovered from the disastrous spring season. They filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection earlier this year, eventually being acquired for pennies on the dollar by a massive overseas conglomerate that gutted the brand, turning it into a mid-tier mall label. The prestige, the luxury, the legacy, it was all gone, evaporated by the arrogance of one man who thought he could treat people like disposable assets. I never sought out to destroy Oakhaven Luxury or ruin Donovan's career. When people hear this story, they sometimes assume I hatched some brilliant, vindictive master plan in that hotel lobby. They think I orchestrated the downfall of a multi-million-dollar company out of pure spite. But that isn't the truth. The truth is much simpler, and I think much more important. I didn't destroy Donovan. Donovan destroyed himself. He built a house of cards founded on disrespect, intimidation, and ego. All I did was refuse to be the foundation holding it up anymore. When he fired me, when he tried to strip me of my dignity and leave me stranded, I walked away and let his house of cards collapse under its own weight. I didn't actively sabotage the contract. The legal mechanism of void ab initio was a trap of his own making, triggered by his own impulsive cruelty. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do when someone treats you like garbage is to remove your value from their life. You don't have to scream. You don't have to plot revenge. You have to realize your own worth, pack up your skills, your dedication, and your integrity, and take them to someone who appreciates them. When you stop trying to save toxic people from the consequences of their own actions, nature tends to take its course quite effectively. So, that is my story. The story of how a 55-year-old single father went from being stranded overseas with 45 euros, called a loser by an arrogant boss, to directing the global supply chain of a luxury empire. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't without fear. But it was the moment I finally decided to stop accepting the bare minimum. If you are listening to this right now, and you are sitting in a job where your boss belittles you, where your hard work is claimed by others, and where your loyalty is rewarded with threats and disrespect, I want you to hear this loud and clear. You are not trapped. You are not a machine. You have value, and there are people out there who will recognize it, pay for it, and respect it. Do not let anyone convince you that you have to endure abuse to survive. Choose yourself. Thank you for staying with me through this whole journey. If this story resonated with you, if it gave you a bit of hope, or maybe a satisfying dose of corporate karma, please do me a favor. Hit that like button. Leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from, and share your own stories of walking away from toxic workplaces. Your support helps this channel grow and allows us to keep sharing stories of people who decided to stand up and choose their own worth. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves.